It is the 5th century before the Common Era. A man walks barefoot along a dirt road in northern India, heading toward a deer park on the outskirts of Varanasi. He has not eaten well in weeks. His robes are simple. He carries nothing. 6 weeks ago, he sat beneath a fig tree and did not move until something inside him broke open. Or, more precisely, until something inside him finally stopped. Now he is looking for 5 men. These 5 men used to practice with him. They used to believe in him. They watched him starve himself nearly to death for 6 years. And then they watched him eat a bowl of rice pudding, and they walked away in disgust. They called him a quitter. They said he had gone soft. He is walking toward them anyway. When he arrives at the deer park, they see him coming. They make a pact. No one will stand. No one will bow. No one will offer him a seat. He has abandoned the path, and they will treat him accordingly. But something has changed in his face. Something they cannot name. And one by one, without deciding to, they stand, they bow, they offer him a seat. He sits down, and he begins to speak. 5 men, that is the entire audience, the largest spiritual movement in human history. A tradition that will spread across India, into China through Japan, across Southeast Asia, and eventually into every country on earth, begins in a park with 5 guys. Who thought this man had given up? This is not a list of monks. This is not a catalog of saints doing saintly things behind monastery walls. This is not a story about people who were born holy. This is a story about a teacher who looked at murderers, outcasts, courtesans, grieving mothers, and a barber from the lowest rung of society, and said, You can wake up, because here is what most people get wrong about the Buddha's disciples. You picture them in matching robes, sitting in perfect rows, eyes half closed, radiating peace, a spiritual elite, a monastery brochure. The truth is, stranger, and far more useful. The Pali word for disciple is savaka. Say it sa-vaka. It does not mean follower. It does not mean believer. It literally means one who hears. That is the only job requirement. Not holiness, not purity, not even faith, just the willingness to hear, and somewhere in a crowd that will gather years from now, there is a man with human finger bones strung around his neck. He has killed 99 people. He needs one more. We will get to him, but not yet. Let us start with the inner circle. The ones who shaped the teaching itself. 2 young men are sitting at the feet of a famous skeptic teacher named Sanjaya in the city of Rajagaha. Their names are Sāriputta and Moggallāna. They are best friends. They have been best friends since childhood. And they have made a pact. Whoever finds the truth first will tell the other immediately. One morning, Sāriputta sees a monk walking through the city. The monk moves differently. There is a quietness in him that Sāriputta has never seen in any of the hundreds of teachers they have studied under. He stops the monk and asks, "What does your teacher say?" The monk, a man named Assaji, gives him a single verse. Just a summary of the Buddha's teaching on cause and effect, and Sāriputta feels the ground shift beneath him. He runs to find Moggallāna. He tells him, and they leave. Together that day, they walk away from their teacher, their community, everything they have built, because Sāriputta heard one sentence and knew it was true. The Buddha later named Sāriputta foremost in wisdom. Not foremost in devotion, not foremost in meditation. Wisdom, the ability to see a teaching clearly, to organize it, to transmit it, so others could understand. You can think of him as the person who turned the Buddha's insights into a system that could survive without the Buddha. And Moggallāna, his best friend, was named foremost in psychic powers. The tradition says he could see into other realms, that he traveled to heavens and hells. You do not have to believe any of that. What matters is this: Moggallāna was murdered. Hired bandits from a rival sect beat him to death. The man the tradition calls the most supernaturally powerful of all the disciples died, bleeding on a road, killed by men who disagreed with his teacher. Stay with me, because the next disciple is the one who will break your heart. His name is Ānanda, and he is the most human figure in the entire Pali canon. Ānanda was the Buddha's cousin. He became the Buddha's personal attendant and served in that role for 25 years. 25 years of walking beside the teacher, sleeping near his door, remembering every word of every discourse. The tradition says he had perfect memory, that at the first Buddhist council, held shortly after the Buddha's death, Ānanda stood up and recited every single teaching from memory. Every sutta in the Pali canon begins with the phrase, "Thus have I heard," and the I is Ānanda. But here is the part nobody tells you. Ānanda was not enlightened when the Buddha died. He had spent 25 years closer to the teacher than any other human being, and he had not completed the path. He was still, in the technical language of the tradition, a stream enterer, someone who had seen the truth but had not fully let go. And when the Buddha lay dying at Kusinara, Ānanda went behind a building and wept. The texts say he leaned against the doorframe and cried, saying, "I am still a learner, and my teacher, who was so compassionate toward me, is about to pass away." You can imagine this? You can feel it. The person who answered every question you ever had, who never once turned you away, who saw you more clearly than you saw yourself, closing his eyes for the last time. And you are not ready. The Buddha heard that Ānanda was crying. He sent for him, and he said, in front of everyone, "Enough. Ānanda, do not grieve. Have I not told you that all things that are dear to us must change and be separated from us? How could it be that what is born, what is formed, what is conditioned, should not pass away?" And then he said this, "Ānanda, for a long time you have served me with loving kindness in deed, in word and in mind, generously, wholeheartedly, without reserve. You have done well. Ānanda, keep practicing, and you will soon be free." Ānanda did awaken. The night before the first council, he sat in meditation all through the night, and in the moment he finally let go. The tradition says it happened as he was lying down to rest. In the space between sitting and sleeping, he understood. Now here is the figure who makes Ānanda's story even more complicated. His name is Mahāpajāpatī, and he was the opposite of Ānanda in almost every way. Mahāpajāpatī was an ascetic, severe, disciplined. He lived in the forest, wore rag robes, ate once a day. Where Ānanda was emotional and devoted, Mahāpajāpatī was hard and precise. And when the Buddha died, Mahāpajāpatī was not there. He was traveling. He heard the news on the road. The texts say he arrived at Kisāgotamī after the cremation had already been prepared. The funeral pyre had been lit, but the fire would not catch. It simply would not burn. And then Mahāpajāpatī arrived, and he walked around the pyre 3 times and bowed, and the fire caught. You do not have to take this literally. What matters is what happened next. Mahāpajāpatī convened the first Buddhist council at Rajagaha. He organized 500 monks to compile everything the Buddha had taught. Ānanda recited the discourses. A monk named Upāli recited the monastic rules, and from that council, held in a cave, 3 months after the Buddha's death, came the Pali Canon as we have it today. Without Mahāpajāpatī, none of it survives. Without Ānanda's memory, none of it exists. Without Moggallāna and Sāriputta leaving their teacher that morning in Rajagaha, none of it begins. And this is where the teaching turns, because if you look at the inner circle, the Buddha's closest students, you do not see perfection. You see a man who was murdered, a man who cried in public and was challenged for not being good enough, an ascetic so severe he made other monks uncomfortable, and 2 best friends who walked away from everything because of a single sentence. That is not a spiritual elite. That is a family. Now pause for a moment and notice the pattern. The Buddha did not choose his closest disciples because they were the most talented. He did not run a selection process. He did not look for the most disciplined meditators or the most brilliant minds. Sāriputta came because he heard one sentence from a monk on the street. Moggallāna came because his best friend told him to. Ānanda was his cousin, and he spent 25 years at the Buddha's side. Without awakening, Mahāpajāpatī was so intense, he made everyone around him nervous. What they had in common was not talent. It was not purity. It was the willingness to hear and to keep showing up. If this is shifting something in how you understand the Buddha's community, you are in the right place. Like and subscribe to Dharma, made simple, because what comes next goes deeper. The inner circle is only half the story. The Buddha also opened the door to people that every other institution in ancient India had locked out. And that is where this gets remarkable. In ancient India, your birth determined your life. This was not a suggestion. It was the law. The caste system told you what work you could do, who you could marry, where you could sit, and whose shadow you were not allowed to cross. A barber was near the bottom. A barber cut hair, trimmed nails, and performed minor surgeries. And, for this, he was considered impure. He could not eat with a Brahmin. He could not study the sacred texts. He could not ordain in any spiritual tradition. His name was Upāli. And the day he showed up at the Buddha's community, something happened that had never happened before in Indian religious history. A group of young Sakyan princes, men from the Buddha's own royal clan, arrived at the same time, wanting to ordain. They came with attendants, with fine robes, with the assumption that their rank would carry over into the monastic life. Upāli had come with nothing. He had been their barber. The Buddha ordained Upāli first, not at the same time. First before the princes deliberately, so that the Sakyan princes, men who had never bowed to a person of lower caste, would have to bow to their former barber every single day for the rest of their lives, because in the Sangha, seniority was determined by ordination date, not by birth, not by caste, not by wealth, by the day you showed up. Upāli went on to become foremost in Vinaya, the monastic code. The barber became the supreme authority on the rules. Every monk in every monastery, in every country where Buddhism has ever existed, follows rules that were recited and preserved by a man who used to cut hair for a living. Pay attention to this, because the next story is even harder. Her name is Mahāpajāpatī, and she is the Buddha's aunt. She is also his foster mother. The woman who raised him after his birth mother died 7 days after he was born. She fed him. She held him. She watched him grow into a prince, and then she watched him leave everything behind to search for the truth. Years later, after the Buddha had established the Sangha, Mahāpajāpatī came to him and asked to ordain. She wanted to practice as a nun, as a bhikkhuni, say it bhikkhuuni. She wanted what the monks had been given. The Buddha said no. She asked again. He said no again. She asked a third time. He said no a third time. The texts do not tell us exactly why. Scholars have debated this for centuries. Some say the Buddha was concerned about the social consequences for women living without family protection. Some say the texts were edited later to reflect the biases of the monks who compiled them. Some say it was a test. What we know is this: the Buddha refused his own foster mother 3 times. And then Mahāpajāpatī did something extraordinary. She shaved her head. She put on ochre robes, and she walked, barefoot, with a group of Sakyan women, all the way from Kapilavatthu to Vesali. Days of walking. When she arrived, her feet were swollen and bleeding. She stood at the gate, covered in dust, and she waited. Ānanda found her there. And Ānanda, the man who cried at the Buddha's deathbed, the man who always led with his heart, went to the Buddha and asked, "Can women attain awakening if they practice the Dharma?" The Buddha said, yes. Then why not allow them to ordain? And the order of nuns was established. Mahāpajāpatī became the first bhikkhuni, the Therigatha, the verses of the elder Nuns, preserves poems written by women who ordained after her. These are some of the oldest recorded words by women in all of human history, and they exist because one woman refused to accept no for an answer, and one man asked the question that needed to be asked. Here is what most people miss about the Sangha. It was never only monks. From the very beginning, or close to it, there were nuns. Laywomen and laymen. 4 groups, not one. And the community included people that no other institution would touch. There is a woman named Ambapāli in the city of Vaisali. She is a courtesan, the most famous one in the region, beautiful, wealthy, independent, and one day the Buddha is passing through Vaisali with his monks, and Ambapāli invites him for a meal at her mango grove. The Likshavi princes, the wealthiest, most powerful men in the city, also invite the Buddha. They send decorated chariots. They send servants. They offer grand pavilions. The Buddha says no to the princes. He says yes to the courtesan. The texts say the princes were furious. They snapped their fingers in frustration. A gesture, the Pali canon records, with almost comic specificity. But the Buddha went to Ambapāli's grove. He accepted her food, and afterward she donated the entire mango grove to the Sangha. She later ordained and, according to the Therigatha, attained full awakening. Her verses are among the most striking in the collection. She describes watching her own body age and finding in that impermanence not despair, but freedom. And then there is Kisāgotamī. She is young. She carries the dead child from house to house, begging for medicine. Please, she says, please, someone must have medicine for my son. People look at her with pity. Some look away. No one can help. Someone tells her to go see the Buddha. She goes. She holds the body out to him and begs for help. The Buddha does not explain impermanence. He does not quote a sutta. He does not say, all things that are born must die. He says, go into the city. Bring me a mustard seed from a house where no one has ever died. Mustard seeds were in every kitchen. Every household had one. This should be easy. She goes to the first house. Has anyone died here? The woman at the door looks at her. My husband last year. The second house. My mother, the third house. Our eldest daughter. House after house after house. And slowly, not because anyone told her, but because she saw it herself, she understands. She buries her son. She returns to the Buddha. And she ordains. The 7th century Chinese pilgrim Wenzong visited the ruins of the Jeddah Grove and the sites where these disciples lived and practiced. 1,200 years after the Buddha's death, local people still remembered their names, still told their stories, not because they were saints, because they were recognizable. You look at Kisāgotamī and you see every parent who has ever lost a child. You look at Upāli and you see every person who was told they were not enough. You look at Mahāpajāpatī and you see every woman who had to fight for a seat at the table. The Pali word for this community is Sangha. Say it, Sangha. It does not mean monastery. It does not mean spiritual elite. It means the people you practice with. The people who see you clearly, including the parts you would rather hide. Now we come to the man with the finger bones. His name is Angulimāla. The word itself tells you what he is. Anguli means finger. Mala means garland. He wears a necklace made from the fingers of the people he has killed. 99 of them, the tradition says he was once a brilliant student, gentle, devoted to his teacher. But his teacher consumed by jealousy or madness, told him that to complete his training, he had to kill 1,000 people and bring proof. And Angulimāla, for reasons the texts leave hauntingly unclear, began by the time this story reaches the Buddha. Angulimāla has terrorized an entire region. Villages are empty. Roads are abandoned. The king has sent soldiers. And Angulimāla is one kill short of his 1,099 fingers on the garland. He needs one more. His mother hears what is happening. She goes out looking for him, not to stop him, but because she is his mother, and she cannot help it. She walks toward the forest where he is hiding. And the tradition says that if the Buddha had not intervened, the 100th kill would have been her. But the Buddha is already walking down that road. He walks alone. His monks have begged him not to go. The king has warned him. Everyone who knows what is on that road has told him to turn back. He keeps walking. Angulimāla sees him from the trees. A single monk, unarmed, calm, easy. He begins to run, and this is where the story becomes something that has stayed with people for 25 centuries. Angulimāla runs. He is young, strong, a killer in his prime. The Buddha is walking, not running, not hurrying, walking at the same steady pace. And Angulimāla, despite sprinting with everything he has, cannot close the distance. The gap does not shrink. You do not have to take this literally. You do not have to believe in supernatural walking. But stay with the image. A man running at full speed after what he wants. And the thing he wants is simply walking, and he cannot reach it. You have felt this. The harder you chase, the further it gets. The more you grab, the less you hold. Angulimāla finally stops. He is gasping, and he shouts, "Stop, ascetic, stop!" The Buddha does not turn around. He says, "Still walking, I have stopped. Angulimāla, it is you who have not stopped. There is one more thing." That single line, "I have stopped, it is you who have not stopped." Think about what the Buddha is actually saying. I have stopped killing. I have stopped running. I have stopped grasping. I have stopped needing the next thing to make me whole. I have stopped. And you, the man with 99 fingers on a rope around your neck, you have not stopped. You are still running, still chasing, still believing that the next thing you take will be the thing that finally fills the hole. Angulimāla drops his weapon. He falls to the ground. He asks to ordain. The Buddha says, yes. Think about that for 1 second. A man who has murdered 99 people asks to join the community, and the Buddha says, yes. Not first do penance for 10 years. Not first prove you have changed. Not first go, explain yourself to the families. Yes, now today. Angulimāla puts on robes. He shaves his head. He begins to practice, and the next time he walks into a village to collect his morning food, the same villages he terrorized. The people recognize him. They throw stones. They throw garbage. They throw broken pottery. He comes back to the Buddha, bleeding from his scalp. his robe torn, his bowl shattered. The Buddha looks at him and says, "Bear it, Angulimāla. You are experiencing in this life what would have taken eons to exhaust. Bear it. This is not forgiveness." The Buddha does not say, "You are forgiven." He does not say, "It is okay." He does not erase what happened. What he says is something far harder and far more honest. You will carry this. The consequences are real. The pain you caused is real. And you will sit with it. But you are not finished. And Angulimāla was not finished. The Angulimāla Sutta, preserved in the Majjhima Nikāya, the 86th discourse in the collection, says he attained full awakening. An arahant, complete freedom, a man who had taken 99 lives, found the end of suffering. And I need you to hear this carefully. You know someone like Angulimāla. Maybe not a killer, but someone who has done things they believe they cannot come back from. Someone who carries something on their chest that they have never told anyone. Maybe that person is sitting near you right now. Maybe that person is you. The teaching of Angulimāla is not all is forgiven. The teaching is you are not your worst act. The thing you carry, the guilt, the shame, the 3 in the morning inventory of everything you wish you had not done, does not have the final word. What you do next has a word, and what you do after that has a word, and the accumulation of those words can become a new sentence. That is not a metaphor. That is the mechanics of karma. Say it, kamma, the Pali word for what we call karma. Karma does not mean cosmic punishment. It means intentional action. What you choose to do, knowing what you are doing. Angulimāla's past actions had consequences. Real ones, stones and broken pottery and blood on his robes. But his present actions, the choice to stop, to turn to practice, those had consequences too. The worst thing you have done is not the last thing you will do. If you know someone who needs to hear that, share this video with them. Sometimes a teaching arrives at exactly the right moment. Sometimes it arrives 2,500 years late and still lands on time. So what do you take from all of this? 3 things first. The Buddha's disciples were not a spiritual elite. They were a murderer who wore a garland of finger bones, a courtesan who gave away her mango grove, a barber who became the supreme authority on monastic law, a grieving mother who carried her dead child from house to house, a woman who walked barefoot for days because she was told no 3 times and refused to accept it, and a man who cried in public when his teacher died and was told he was not good enough and woke up anyway. That is not a hall of saints. That is a room full of human beings. Second, you do not need to fix yourself before you begin. This is the lie that keeps people from starting. The idea that you need to be calmer first, more disciplined first, more healed first. Every single disciple the Buddha accepted came to him with something broken. Sāriputta was restless. Ānanda was attached. Angulimāla was blood-soaked. Kisāgotamī was destroyed by grief. The brokenness was not an obstacle to the path. It was the reason for the path. Third, And this is the one I want you to sit with. 2,500 years later. You still know their names. Ānanda, Kisāgotamī. Angulimāla, Upāli. Mahāpajāpatī. You know them not because they were perfect, not because they floated above the mess of being human, not because they had it figured out. You know them because they were in the mess, fully, completely without pretending, and they did not look away. That is what the Buddha built. Not a religion of perfect people, a community of people willing to see clearly, willing to hear, willing to keep showing up, even when they were not ready, even when they were told they were not enough. Even when the stones were still coming. The Pali Canon calls that community the Sangha. And here is the part that might change your afternoon. You do not have to go to a monastery to be in it. You do not have to shave your head. You do not have to read a single sutta. The Sangha is wherever two or more people agree to practice seeing clearly together. Your kitchen table, your therapist's office, a park bench with a friend who actually listens. Which disciple's story hit you the hardest? Tell me in the comments. I am genuinely curious, because every time I go back to these stories, a different one lands differently. Last year it was Ānanda. This year it is Angulimāla. Next year it might be Kisāgotamī. That is how the Dharma works. It meets you where you are, not where you were. If this gave you a new way to see the Buddha's community, like this video, subscribe to Dharma Made Simple and share it with someone who might need to hear that they do not have to be perfect to start. Hit the bell so you are here when the next one drops. The Buddha did not build a religion of perfect people. He built a community of people who were willing to see clearly. That is the Sangha. And you are already in it.